Oh yeah, I mean a bunch of them. I interviewed Denzel Washington very early in his career, and he's turned into a really interesting guy, and much more, sort of. He was very young and very new at that point, and I'd be interested to talk to him now about, just from the point of view of a seasoned professional. I always enjoyed the times that I talked to Martin Scorsese. I never felt like I had enough time. You talk about people who are difficult to interview. I'm someone who never recorded interviews. I always took notes, and Martin Scorsese talks at about 100 words a minute. So, and every word is golden. And so my hand would be so tired by the time I was done, and I'd love to just have the chance to talk to him without it being an interview.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast. We get to meet great authors from around the world. I'm really excited to have this gentleman on my screen today. Been really checking out his stuff. He's a great author. He's got an amazing backstory. He's met a few people you might know. And Marshall's here on the show. And it's interesting for me to interview an interviewer, because I know I'm going to learn something in the process as well. Marshall, welcome to the show. Nice to have you on Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, Dave.
Excellent. Marshall, where are you? Where do you live in this big world of ours?
I live in, I live in Ossining, New York, which is about 35 miles from Times Square. Where are you?
I'm in Niagara Falls, just outside in Canada.
Okay. I've been there many times. I spent several years of my career working in Rochester at the newspaper there. So
there you go.
Everybody that came to visit us, we took them to Niagara Falls.
Did you come to the Canadian side, or did you stay on the U.S. side?
Yes, we went both sides. It was a lot easier to go back and forth in those days. This is 40 years ago.
Yeah, things are a little different right now. Sure. That's another topic. But the Canadian side, you get the best view of the U.S. side, though. It's pretty ironic, but...
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The Cave of the Winds, the Maid of the Mist, those are things you have to experience to really appreciate Niagara Falls and the power of that amazing attraction.
It's amazing. Good. Excellent. So your career, Marshall, you've had the opportunity to sit in front of people, interview people, meet some pretty amazing people throughout your journey. What was it for you that kind of led you to writing articles, interviewing people? Is it a sense of curiosity? What is it for you when you want to meet with these great people and have time with them, interviewing them?
I always felt really fortunate to have the career I had, because I always identify as a newspaper reporter, and being a newspaper reporter gives you the license to ask people nosy questions. Mm-hmm. And that's, and I've got a lot of curiosity. I also appreciated the fact that as a reporter, every day you're doing something different. And you're constantly learning things. That was also true of being a movie critic. So it was, it was the fact that there was always someone out there who was doing something that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to know how they did it. That was always, I was always fascinated in the artistic process, in where ideas come from, how people realize when an idea is a good one and act upon it.
What was the Marshall Fine secret sauce to your critiques, to your interviews? Did you have your own little unique thing that you tried to do?
I would tell you that my default mode as a critic was the wisecrack.
Okay.
I was always looking to entertain, because I felt that as a critic, yes, you are, passing judgment, but you're also, you're hopefully entertaining the reader while you're doing it. So.
Okay. All right. So some people kind of take a scientific approach. They're all about facts. They're all about history and dates and all of that stuff. And I like that you have that kind of a smart view of it and make people laugh at the same time. I like that.
A little bit. I mean, you have to know your stuff, and you have to be able to show that you do, but at the same time that you don't take what you're doing too seriously.
Anybody stand out for you? I kind of, in my mind, already know the answer to this in my perspective, my answer for you. Anybody that you met with and you had time with interviewing that was a little bit difficult for you to interview? Maybe they're not they don't get interviewed often. Maybe they're kind of the ones that are hosting and interviewing quite often. Anybody you sat down with and you're like, it was a little bit of work for you to get a story from these people?
It depends on the kind of interview. I mean, I used to interview people to write stories, but I also used to host film clubs, and I would interview people about. We'd watch a movie, and then someone from the movie would be there, and we'd talk about it on stage in front of the audience afterwards and take questions.
Hmm.
Two different kinds of interviews. In terms of writing a story, I would say Spike Lee was. I interviewed several times and was a very challenging interview. I mean, it's in the name, Spike.
Right.
He was someone who you had to really ask him pointed questions. Any yes or no question got a yes or no answer, and so
Hmm.
you had to really engage with him. In terms of being on stage, I had an experience with an actor named Kevin Corrigan. I think if you look him up, you go, "Oh yeah, that guy." He was in a jillion indie films in the '90s and the early 2000s, and I had him. He was in a movie that I showed, and he came and we were talking in the lobby while the movie was on. Very nice guy, very easy to talk to. I got him on stage, and the guy was like crawling out of his skin. He was the most uncomfortable person on stage that I'd ever talked to. And it was like pulling teeth to get him to talk about stuff. And afterwards, a friend of mine who was in the audience says, "Boy, you were really working with that one." Because this was a guy who, as an actor, is always being given the words to say. But when he has
Right.
to speak about it as himself, really doesn't have the vocabulary. There are a number of actors like that who really can't discuss how they do what they do. And you have to recognize that and sort of talk to them about other things. Robert De Niro being number one on that list. He's like impossible to get him to talk about acting itself because he just can't really articulate and doesn't want to articulate how he does it because he doesn't really know, and he's afraid that if he tells you, if he puts it into words, he'll lose it.
Yeah.
And I can see that particularly. I can see that about writing as well. So
Through my podcast, I've had the opportunity to meet some pretty amazing people that I really look up to. And it's hard because in the moment I have this little fanboy switch I have to shut off. And the one thing I've known is when I talk to people who are notable and people have interviewed many times, is there seems to be a line of questioning that everybody asks. And it's almost like they're on automatic response. They just do the thing. And they have a lot of media training. So to break through the media training and get to the person, I had Adam Nimoy on my show. Leonard Nimoy's his father. And everybody that had Adam on their show talked about Leonard. They didn't talk about Adam. And I wanted to focus on him. And in that, when we were all done, he was just like, that was really fun. Like, I got to talk about stuff I never get to talk about because everybody wants to talk about the other thing, right? So I just tried to realize that the people sitting in front of me, whether they have been super famous or they're brand new, they just want to be treated like regular people and humans. And when we can honor them and serve them well and give them a great conversation, I think they seem to loosen up a little bit because they're not like on the regular news you'd see on TV and they get a 15-minute spot or 5-minute spot, blah, 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 movie, plug, plug, plug. When you can get past that, I think you get a really different side of these people. Has anybody kind of opened up for you like that?
um, I'm trying to think of somebody specific, and the one that comes to mind only is I was doing a thing with Kevin Costner one time,
Hmm.
and he stopped on stage in front of an audience after one of his movies, and he stopped and said, "You're a really good listener."
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, I took that as a great compliment. The other thing I used to really take as a compliment is if someone said, "That's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that
Yeah,
before."
right.
I felt like, okay, I've done my homework to the point where I know what they have been asked, but I also know what they haven't been asked that I think is interesting. So,
Nice. Excellent. How do you bring all of this background knowledge, interview skills, connections over to writing as an author? What things do you bring with you? What things do you leave behind?
um, I think what you bring with you is your powers of observation and particularly your memory. I feel like I have a really good memory, both for history, the history of my time, uh, because I was writing about popular culture for 50 years. And
Yeah.
so essentially you are, trying to stay ahead of the zeitgeist or, figure out what the zeitgeist is. So I I happen to have one of those memories where I just retain a lot of stuff. It drives my wife crazy. I'm going, oh yes, that's the actor that we saw in such and such. Or yeah, we saw that movie at this theater. And she goes, how do you remember that 40 years later? But I also have a good memory for what things feel like. I think I remember what it feels like to have your heart broken. I remember what it feels like to, have an early disappointment in your career, to have an unexpected victory. Those kinds of things I think are quintessentially human. And that's what writing fiction is about, is, figuring out what makes people tick and finding a way to explain that in an interesting way and an interesting story.
Yeah. Fiction writing is a lot different than interviewing and writing articles. It's
Sure.
a different animal altogether, right? As you write fiction, then, is there somebody that you look up to as a fellow author in the fiction space that you're not that you're copying them, but they inspire you?
My early inspirations as a writer when I was in high school and college were people like Kurt Vonnegut and Richard Brautigan, Tom Robbins.
Yep.
I tried to write like them. I couldn't. And I would, plus I was, so I read, though that's who I read early on. At this point in my life, I don't read a lot of contemporary fiction. I tend to want to be in my own headspace world and don't want to be in somebody else's when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So the fiction that I read, I tend to read a lot of nonfiction, mostly celebrity biographies. God help me, A Busman's Holiday. But I tend to read crime fiction. Like I love Elmore Leonard. I love Michael Connelly. I love Dennis Lehane. Or I read I love Elmore Leonard, so I read a lot of Elmore Leonard, working my way through Elmore Leonard's westerns, Western novels, because it's a kind of writing I could never do. My favorite writing is Elmore Leonard's crime fiction, and I love Quentin Tarantino's films and Scorsese's films, and yet I could never write one of those things because I don't have that kind of mathematical mind. And I do think that writing a good thriller, writing a mystery is like a math equation that ultimately you solve for X. And I just, it's like I'm not a puzzle person. I don't like doing puzzles particularly, and you have to be able to come up with create a puzzle that fools other people.
Right.
And I'm too easily fooled.
How long did it take you as an author to find your voice in this style of writing compared to what you've done in the past?
My first novel that was published, The Autumn of Ruth Winters, which came out a year ago, I wrote a first draft in about 2 months, but after I finished it, I had sort of an epiphany about halfway through the book that changed the tone of it from that point on. And so I had to go back to the beginning and rewrite it so that the tone matched all the way through. But I felt very clear about what I was trying to do right from the beginning. And writing itself has never been a task for me. It's something that, I need to do. And so it's, I have, because I would credit my training as a journalist where I had to come in every day and, write 3 or 4 stories right off the bat. There's I'm not precious about my writing. I never have writer's block. I knock wood on that, but it's just that's never an issue for me. So it was more about figuring out what the tone was and and how the story should go, while being true to the character on that first one. And the challenge was different on this newest one, Hemlock Lane, because I was trying for something a little more complex in the structure.
Yeah. How do you define your tone? I think that's one thing that we don't talk about often from an author's perspective. Is that feel. We talk about Quentin Tarantino, we talk about Stephen King. They have their own tones, they have their own way of writing. What would you say your tone is?
Well, again, as a critic, my default mode was the wisecrack. And the thing that I had to go back and change in The Autumn of Ruth Winters was I wanted a book that was about sincere emotion. And that meant getting rid of sarcasm and cynicism and wisecracks, basically. That, to strip that stuff away and really just sort of look at the character in a way that was still interesting and honest, uh, without falling back on, coming up with some, a funny way to end something.
Yeah.
It's, it was more about just, I really wanted to be true to this character. And with the newest book, it was again about finding the right tone particularly in terms of a character, because it's about essentially four different characters seen over the course of 4 days, and so I had to find the tone for each character.
Interesting. Okay. That tone, you think is there a correlation between the two books, or are they completely different path for you as the author?
Very different. The first one is, I guess I would say, is more of a feel-good book,
Okay.
and the second one is a little more dramatic and a lot more sort of conflict that isn't necessarily easily resolved.
Okay.
So,
When you're writing, who do you have in mind as a reader that you're kind of writing towards? Is that part of your process?
I've always basically sort of written for myself.
Good.
I want it. It's always about, is this the best this can be? Will this entertain people? If it's entertaining me, if it works for me, hopefully it'll work for other people. That as I hone and distill what I've written down to what's finally released, that I feel that, the years as a writer, again, writing for newspapers, having to be readable is really, it's really a key thing, writing for a newspaper. And that's what I always aim for. That's what I'm aiming for in the writing of these novels, is that if nothing else, you want to keep reading.
Right. When you write in journalism and for papers, you have deadlines and you have to meet deadlines. Does that carry over for you as an author? Does that keep you motivated to write towards a goal? Because sometimes if you don't have that journalistic background, you don't write to that deadline. You just free flowing. A book can take 10, 15 years because it just kind of meanders along. As a journalist, it's Saturday, 5 p.m. It's got to be on my desk. So does that help you at all to bring that forward into your writing?
Oh, it definitely affects me in terms of, I'm very sort of outcome focused. But at the same time, the thing I appreciate about these novels is I don't have a deadline. I'm working at my own pace, and I can work as much or as little as I want. I enjoy not being a writer for hire, that I'm doing this for myself. And so it doesn't feel like work. I like to say that my happy place is sitting out on the deck on my house under the awning on a nice summer day, with a pad and a desk, a lap desk and a pen, writing.
Nice.
That's a good day for me.
Excellent. How long did it take you to write your newest book?
This one also, I would say, took about 2.5 months for the first draft.
Wow.
And then another, I'd say, another couple months for the rewrite. Then my agent sold it, and then I had like 6 weeks of intense rewriting last winter, and it was an amazing process because as a critic, I was someone who never worked for an editor who knew more about what I was doing than I did, and so I butted heads with a lot of editors. Working with my editor on this book, a fellow named Dave Downing, who I really admire his talents in terms of getting more out of me. I literally scrapped about 20% of the book and wrote 20% new, to the point where it changed the synopsis of the novel.
Wow.
Because you need more here. There's not enough of this here. This character is too much in this direction. And it was incredibly intense process, but just also incredibly fulfilling. So I really enjoyed that part of it. To me, my saying is, I always tell people, all writing is rewriting. And that's where the fun is. That's where the fun is for me.
Yeah. Being someone that has been a movie critic, TV critic, you've done all this in the past. Have you find yourself turning your criticism ability inwardly for yourself, kind of on your own writing? And is that kind of beneficial for you or not so beneficial?
Um, I always, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, how is this going to be received? If I was writing about this, what would I say?
Right.
On the other hand, I think I have a fairly thick skin from, almost 50 years as a critic.
Yeah.
Just because, people will disagree with you, uh, and not necessarily in a nice way. But so I have a thick skin, and so when I read negative reviews, I my first response is usually, "Oh yeah, I've written that review before."
Yeah.
So
Right.
it does, I also learned on my very first book, my biography of Sam Peckinpah, that the satisfaction comes in the doing. That ultimately, once you're done and turn it over to a publisher, everything else is out of your control.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about how it's published or how it's received or whether it's reviewed or if it's reviewed well. All you can take is the satisfaction in the process itself and in the doing. And so from that book on, I was always very conscious at the moments where things seem to be the hardest or the dreariest, thinking, but this is the good part. And appreciate it while you're doing it because eventually you got to stop doing it and someone else will take over.
See, your history with, critics and being critical and doing all that for movies and stuff, it's not that it's negative criticism. You're seeing things that most people wouldn't see. You're picking up on things, good, bad, things that are being improved, things that you love. But you have a filter that's different than, I guess, people who don't do what you've done for this long. So that's interesting that you can bring that in-house and then leverage that for yourself and kind of be your own critic of your own work. Good, bad, make it better, right? You're always kind of filtering everything in that context. So I like that you can then bring that home and just leverage it for your own work. That's great.
Well, I'm also old enough. I mean, I'm going to be 75 this year, and that I think I have a pretty good sense of what I've done as opposed and how it compares to what's out in the world. So, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing and satisfied, happy with what I'm doing and incredibly gratified at the response I got to the first novel. It was completely unexpected.
Yeah. So take us to the characters then in Hemlock Lane. Who are we going to meet? What do we need to know from a reader's perspective so that we can jump right into the story?
This is a story set in a family home in Tarrytown, North Tarrytown, New York, in 1967, and it's set over the course of 4 days, a long weekend, and it's about a daughter who's about 25. Her name is Nora Levitsky. She's just finished graduate school, and she's coming home for the weekend because her father has asked her to come home, and she has a secret that she really doesn't want to tell her domineering mother, that she has in fact taken a job teaching in Chicago and is going to be moving there. She's been at Syracuse University. And so she's coming home with this secret, trying to sort of help her father however she can without her mother finding this out. And her mother is sort of the central character in the family and the one that everybody tiptoes around. But as I said, the book is set over the course of 4 days, and each day is told from the perspective of one of the characters. The first day is told from Nora's perspective. The second day is from her father, Saul, who is about to sell his business and retire. And the reason he's called her down is that he's had a setback in that regard and also doesn't know how to tell his wife. And the third day is from the perspective of the mother. Her name is Lillian, who, again, has everybody on pins and needles, has dominated the lives of both of her daughters, and Nora is trying to break free. And the last day is from the perspective of the housekeeper, whose name is Clara, and who has been a presence in all of their lives for particularly the girls, and in a way that hopefully is not obvious throughout. And it's like I'm trying to sort of reveal things on each day from the new perspective, and you learn things that shed light on what you've already known and gives it a different twist.
Where did the idea come from for Hemlock Lane? What was the seed?
There were two really. One is the just I had the idea sort of along the lines of Thornton Wilder's Bridge of San Luis Rey, where
Okay.
they have all of these characters who all met the same fate, but they tell their stories leading up to that. And I thought that would be an interesting way to tell a story. And then I thought, but instead, maybe a family over the course of a weekend, and so each day from a different character. And the other seed was just an old family story about an aunt of mine who, in the '60s, was a ladies wear buyer for a department store in Minneapolis, which is where I'm from, who got a job, a much better job with a chain, a department store in Cincinnati, and this was a big source of friction with my grandparents, who didn't want her moving
Okay.
away from town. That was the bare bones of it. That's all I remember of that story. But from that, I spun this out, and I actually sort of based, I mean, not actually, I based these characters on members of my family, just sort of as I was imagining them. None of this stuff happened, but
Yeah.
I was imagining them going through these things.
Wow. All right. What are you hearing for feedback so far from people advanced reading, comments from your friends and family around the book? What kind of things are you hearing back?
I've only I showed it to my wife and to my cousin, who is the daughter of that aunt.
Okay.
And they both said, wow, you really nailed your grandmother. So, and your grandfather. So, but it's very positive. The response I've got is that, people are caught up in the ride and are being surprised from the section to section, the things that they find out about the characters.
What brings you joy about Hemlock Lane?
Say again?
What brings you joy about the book?
That I was able to figure out a way to create this character that's of the mother in a way that people will recognize her for the sort of negative force in the family that she is, and yet understand why she is the way she is.
Okay.
That was sort of the hardest thing for me to come to terms with. Was it's easy to create a villain. It's hard to understand. Nobody lives their life thinking they're the villain in somebody else's story.
Right.
Nobody thinks they're a villain. And so how do people reconcile this kind of behavior to themselves? And why do they behave that way?
I like that. So for the reader, then, you're kind of your love letter. I like to kind of bring that up as well. At the end of the book, they're finished. They close the book. They're done reading. What's the finish line? What are you hoping a reader is going to walk away from Hemlock Lane with?
The sense that there is escape from that kind of situation, that there are always allies, that you may not recognize them, but they're there, and that there are many different configurations for a family, that mothers come in many different forms.
Great. I like that. My podcast is called Living the Next Chapter, so I like to ask everybody this. As an author, I know we're celebrating this book coming out in November, which is exciting. My listeners always want to know, though, please ask these authors, are there new things coming in the future? Are they going to continue writing? Is there a next chapter for you, Marshall, after Hemlock Lane?
Yeah, I'm just finishing a third novel at the same time that I'm helping a friend write his memoir. So yeah, I'm rarely not writing. I mean, I've already got plans for. I know what number 4 is going to be, and I have sort of set aside time to start it in December.
If there was one person that you could go back in time and interview again, now knowing where they ended up in life, I'm again looking at your Instagram. There's some pretty interesting people you have photos with. Anybody that you'd like to have a second interview with, a second encounter with?
Oh yeah, I mean a bunch of them. I interviewed Denzel Washington very early in his career, and he's turned into a really interesting guy, and a much more, sort of. He was very young and very new at that point, and I'd be interested to talk to him now about, just from the point of view of a seasoned professional. Um, I always enjoyed the times that I talked to Martin Scorsese. I never felt like I had enough time.
Yeah.
You talk about people who are difficult to interview. I'm someone who never recorded interviews. I always took notes.
Wow.
And Martin Scorsese talks at about 100 words a minute. So, and every word is golden. And so my hand would be so tired by the time I was done. And I'd love to just have the chance to talk to him without it being an interview.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw like Peter Dinklage on your Instagram, for example. Just saw him on the TV, the show Dexter, and I'm like, oh, he's back. I love that. That he's a great character. I love his acting and everything that he does. And I saw him on there. I saw your Tom Hanks. I saw just a bunch of great people, that you get to interact with. It's great.
Over the years, as I said, it was a great job. I was writing about movies in New York for Gannett newspapers and then Star Magazine, and I did like freelance work for the New York Daily News, and I was a contributing editor, Cigar Aficionado, writing their celebrity cover stories. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was always interesting, and and I almost until they got to the point where I kind of took it for granted, where it was just how many because I remember the day first time I ever interviewed Robert Redford, waiting for him in his office on a day where I was scheduled to also interview Peter O'Toole.
Oh wow.
Who was promoting his autobiography, and Robert Redford was an hour late for the interview. And I was like, do I wait for Robert Redford? Do I miss Peter O'Toole? I waited. And I talked to Robert Redford, very apologetic, also notoriously tardy guy, and ultimately, and miss Peter O'Toole. But, talked to Peter O'Toole on the phone, but that was not the same thing as meeting him in person.
Right.
So,
excellent.
no, it was always fun. And the key, like you said, is not treating them like celebrities, but making it a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Recognizing that, they're going to have to go home and deal with, a wife and sick kids and, the mortgage payment and, the windows leaking, whatever. Everybody has those same problems. And it's just a question of recognizing that and, sort of meeting on a level of humanity.
Okay, I'm going to steal a moment with you then as well, Marshall. Some good questions that you like to ask people back when you're interviewing people. Do you have like some go-to questions that you found open up the conversation with people you're sitting across the table from?
It varied from person to person. I always like to have something sort of funny to ask them to start out, just to kind of break the ice.
Yeah.
So it depended on the person, and usually, particularly after a screening, I'd have something off the movie that I would ask them. But go-to questions were always about process, including, my favorite was always asking actors, do you get the same satisfaction from acting now that you did when you started? And how has that changed?
Nice. That's a great question. That's great. That's just, I'm selfishly asking because I want to steal some of your ideas, because I love interviewing people. I love talking to people. And if I can develop on this end as well by having time with someone like you, I think that's great. It's excellent.
Well, I always liked asking writers, do you write, when you have to or when you must?
Yeah.
And for me, it's I always have to be writing. I'm always writing something. This, Ruth, the Autumn of Ruth Winters, is the first novel where I really had the time to just sort of focus on making it what it should be. I was always writing. I've got a hard drive full of screenplays and plays and other novels that I was writing in my spare time while I was, working as a critic and running film clubs, and never had the time to really kind of focus on them the way that I did with this novel. And I think that was, and I also think the fact that I was past the age of 70 when I started writing it, just that many years of experience makes a difference.
Excellent.
I couldn't have written that novel at the age of 40 because I
Really?
not have had the emotional intelligence to do it.
Interesting. Okay. Marshall, let's talk about your website as well. I want to send people to you and to connect with you, follow your journey as an author. Tell us a little bit about your website as well. We'll make sure we have a link in the notes for everyone, but take us to your website.
It's marshallfine.com. And basically, it exists to promote my novels, but I also have links to some of my to my other books, my nonfiction books. I've written biographies of the directors Sam Peckinpah and John Cassavetes and the actor Harvey Keitel. So those are there as well as links to some of my journalism work for Cigar Aficionado and other places, some of my celebrity profiles.
Excellent. Marshall, thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast. Congratulations on Hemlock Lane coming out November 25th. And we'll have this launching for that book release. And excited to see what's next for you, Marshall. I'd love to have you come back in the future as you work on new projects. Keep us in mind.
It'd be my pleasure. Happy to do that.
Excellent, everyone. All the information is always in the show notes. Again, November 25th, 2025. Grab a copy. You can get your advanced pre-orders right now in the links on Marshall's website. And definitely go leave a great review for Marshall when you buy a copy of the book so Marshall can see your reviews. From one critic who reviewed other people's movies, now you get a chance to review Marshall's book. And I know he'd love to hear your thoughts on Hemlock Lane and everything that he does. Marshall, again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.